Hi, and welcome to this Impetus Interview, a series of conversations where we take deep dives into the projects highlighted by the EU Prize for Citizen Science. Today we have a very special episode because we are joined by Roberto Papa and Kerstin Neumann, who were involved in the INCREASE project, who were the grand prize winners. The INCREASE project is looking to unlock the potential of genetic diversity in food plant species, mostly focusing on pulses, and using a citizen science approach to make this data more accessible to agriculturalists, but also the general population. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So I suppose just as a quick introduction, Roberto, could you talk a little bit more about the vision behind the INCREASE project and the development of your rationale, I suppose?
So thanks a lot for this question. And INCREASE start from a call. I mean, it's based on a call from the European Union that asked the community of scientists to develop a project that were able to optimize the conservation and the utilization of plant genetic resources and agrobiodiversity in general. And what we did is that we tried to address this issue following two lines of work. The first line of work was to develop tools to optimize the utilization of genetic resources. And these tools are mostly scientific and technological tools. The idea is to develop genomic-based data sets that associate a certain gene type to a set of information that give to the users the possibility to access the gene bank, the genetic resources that are present in these gene banks, and use them in the practical activity like plant breeding or any other type of use. And this is important. That is also the motivation of the call, because we have a lot of genetic resources worldwide conserved in the gene banks. And the gene banks represent an impressive wealth of diversity that is conserved. And the problem that we face is that even if we are very good in conserving genetic diversity, we are not very good in using the genetic diversity. And it's clear that the important point of having the genetic and of conserving genetic diversity is also to promote the use. So then is an issue if we are able or not to understand what is inside the gene banks and use them for different purposes. We have an estimation that the amount of variety that are present in gene banks is about 7 million of varieties conserved among different species in the different gene banks in the world, and this is a huge patrimony. Also in the context of a more broader idea, because for sure we are facing a crisis of climate and biodiversity. And I would say the biodiversity crisis, even if sometimes it's not so much underlined, is really critical, because that is, let's say, the life, biodiversity is the life on Earth, so it's our life. And on the other hand, is highly connected to the destiny of agriculture and of agrobiodiversity, which is somehow our food. So it's in any case, these two aspects, biodiversity and agrobiodiversity, strictly linked to our life in this planet. And so for this, we need to promote and intensify the utilization. But on the other hand, the only pillar based on, let's say, technological and scientific, let's say, improvement would not be enough if we don't change the pipeline of utilization of genetic resources. Because the innovation system that we are dealing with at the moment is based on the centralized organization where expert users go to the gene bank, take some accessions, and then we try to optimize this understanding of, a well-chosen set of accession. But on the other hand, the number of subjects are limited, and the time that is needed to reach to the final utilization is very long, can be 10, 20 years overall. So that is in our way of thinking, the main problem of the lack of utilization of genetic resources. For this, we propose a new method of conserving genetic resources that is decentralized conservation. Decentralized conservation is a complementary strategy, not alternative for sure, to the gene bank system, and is somehow a way to conserve in a similar manner in terms of organization and, let's say, capacity to conserve and maintain the collections of the gene banks, but in a decentralized ways, try to involve citizens. And citizen, we were thinking that time, we were trying to convince ourselves as well of this idea that was important, are willing to work on it. And that's for this, we have developed this citizen science initiative to test the possibility to develop a new and novel system of conservation of genetic diversity that is decentralized and based on citizen and stakeholder participation. We choose the common bean as a system. In the case of the centralized conservation, the citizen science, because it's a type of crop that somehow is more familiar to most of the people. I mean, I remember when I was in the primary school, the teacher asked us to germinate some beans, and maybe this is an experience that is shared among different people. So we choose this species. Also, there's different colors. You see the background of my screen is very attractive. So we wanted to have an easy start, because what we were proposing, and then Kerstin probably will be more detailed on this, is really a very strict approach of conservation that is guarantee the quality of the conservation process in a way that we know we are conserved, and we are sure that we are conserving properly this accession without losing them. Mm-hmm. This is not just a simple commitment. Also, we don't want to, we want to do as much as possible the same quality standard of the gene bank system, but in a way that this material will be easily leaking in the society and in the agriculture, faster than it will be just when you conserve this material in the gene banks. Also for another reason, because gene banks also now are asked to ship accession here and there by many type of subjects, including citizens or associations. And in a way, the cost and the value of the work that is done by gene banks is so high that I would say that is not something that should be done by gene banks, because the gene bank have an important commitment that is preserving the diversity in a certain way, in a very high quality standard, and would not be meaningful to ask them also to give seeds to citizens. We have to do it in a different way, try to involve citizens, but also for another reason, because when we think about agriculture and about the improvement of genetic diversity, we have to think that there is the interaction with the environment. But the environment is not only the physical environment and the natural environment, but is also the human side of the environment, the agroecosystem and the food system. So we need to have an evaluation of this diversity that is not just from the point of view of the scientists, but should be from the point of view of the users and the citizens.
Mm-hmm. And it's such an interesting approach, and it seems like a more holistic way of doing this research, rather than referring back to the big genetic seed banks and that sort of thing. Kerstin, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got the citizens involved in this these growing experiments, and how they were able to feed back, like allowing them to feed back into your research, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. So it was a learning experience how to get citizens involved over the years. I also want to emphasize that we started during the COVID pandemic, so we were also not able to meet in person. Everything was online, and we had to figure out a way how to get them on board in their native languages. So the first step was, of course, to develop the app, to develop tutorials to make it easier for the citizens to understand what they should phenotype and how and when, and to translate that into all the languages that are spoken in Europe. For sure, we were not able to cover all, but we covered, I believe now, 9 different languages. And that was done by voluntary work in the consortium. So we had defined a translation team, used automatic translation first, and then they were checking this. So to have the base ready was to have the app developed, to have information on the website developed in the native languages. And then, of course, we asked the consortium to disseminate, so try to get citizens on board in their language circle, let's say. And that was then depending on what contacts you had. Of course, we used a professional network. We used media like newspapers, TV if possible. Social media, of course, played a big role, but also any personal networks that the people involved had on the professional, but also on the personal level. And it also really differs from country to country what works best. That's also clear. So we were able to attract already in our pilot round more than 3,400 citizens all across Europe. I think 2/3 were thanks to a TV report in Italy. So it were mainly Italians. And that was a learning curve, also what we needed to adapt in form of information to the citizens, how to make tutorials easier, but also how to better structure the things in the app. And then we were also monitoring during the second round in the registration period where we are. So we have an output of registration from the app. You have to register in the app. And then you can monitor how many registration you have and from which countries they come. And then these people get feedback in our consortium weekly during the registration period to identify early on some gaps. And then they can make more dissemination effort there. Of course, we also had our stakeholder consortium involved into winning citizens to participate. And furthermore, we were on the citizen science platforms in Germany, in Swiss, and in the European citizen science platform. Also we had volunteers that that are not official stakeholders, but that help us in several rounds. For example, the garden association here in Germany, or also Meise Botanical Garden was doing last year a great job in Belgium, and many, many others, which you can't name them all. So this is how in the end we were from round to round growing and having our largest round last year with over 9,000 participants all across Europe.
That's a fantastic kind of result. And it's really interesting to see that. Kind of going back to what Roberto said, I suppose beans are quite recognizable. They come in all these colors. And I used to be a science teacher, and I definitely did do that little experiment of seeing who could grow the biggest bean or the biggest bean kind of from and producing like a little competition between the classmates. And yeah, they are quite, and the idea of being able to almost like a mail order service of like getting involved and getting the beans delivered. It feels really engaged and like a very, especially during COVID times when people were looking for things to do. It just what a nice like home project to kind of get involved with.
Maybe it hit a nerve, but not only due to COVID. I think also this topic of biodiversity is very present in the general public already, and people are really keen on getting access to old varieties. And that's what we feel here in the gene bank as well. Whenever there are some TV reports about, for example, old tomato varieties that they taste better, etc., you have afterwards many, many requests to the gene banks by regular citizens who order seeds suddenly. So it's kind of an easy topic to engage citizens currently. So they're very open for that. And as you are right, so common bean is typically a garden crop, I would say. So that anyway people cultivate in gardens, and you have of course different use cases. Germany is more into snap beans, Southern Europe more into the use of dry beans. So the use cases are a bit different, but all the countries and cultures here, they grow beans regularly still.
Did you provide like a random assortment of beans, or was it kind of directed at, so if for any German participants, they were German varieties mostly, or was it kind of like a grab bag of like random beans that you sent out when people signed up?
It is surprise beans, which our citizens get. So we have a large panel or a large bean collection, which is also work behind to have that. So it's not just suddenly there. This was material which we built up in a previous project named BeanAdapt, where Roberto and us already worked together. And it's kind of, you have to understand a little bit a gene bank accession, or what we call an old variety. It's in the gene bank, the term is accession. That can be a homogeneous genotype on the genetic level. It can be a mixture. And to work with that genetically, scientifically, you have to have a purified line from this gene bank accession. And many, many projects did that. That we had a project before where we took a seed from the gene bank accession jar, single seed descended that genotype, this one plant, harvested the seeds of this one plant, and continued with that purified line. So this was a material we had built up previously, and that's a large collection. And even from that collection, we took only a subset. So it's around 1,100 such single seed descended lines coming from gene banks originally that are evaluated by our citizens. And they come mainly from Europe, but have also origins from America or the rest of the world. And we have, when we have the registration ready, we know the locations of the citizens. In the registration, of course, you have to enter from where you are. And then we have a certain experimental design, which consists of randomization units of 200 citizens or locations, which covers then 1,000 bean lines. And those we distribute meaningful over the growing areas, but we want to have the beans evaluated at all the locations. So it can be that a certain variety will fail in your environment, but this is part of science to see if a bean variety or accession is broadly adapted and can be used everywhere, or is only adapted to a certain location or region. Mm-hmm. And that's what we hope to find out with the help of the citizens.
About that is that to me it was particularly important also to bring the citizen in this point of view. Because at the beginning, the idea of success is just when things go well. While we try to explain it also, we had this Facebook group that we're able to improve the participation of citizens and also interaction between us and them and in a daily manner. And so to understand that sometimes the observation is important per se, and also a failure, like the fact that the plant is not flowering or the fact that you have a lack of production, in our context is a success because it's helping us to understand the area where some variety are better adapted or not, and how, the different genomic characteristics of the genotypes have an importance on determining the success. Mm-hmm. For instance, we have this a group that of material that came originally from an American race of beans that is race Chile, and was introduced in Europe. It's one of the successful introduction from America of common bean. And we already described somehow some indication that we had in a paper that we published about BeanAdapt project, as Kerstin was saying. The indication that there was some limitation of flowering time in area where you have long days, like in the north of Europe. And this data that we obtained by the citizen confirm these hypotheses with a strong statistical value. And then it's important because when you have this, you really think about citizen science. So the citizen contribute to developing new knowledge, and this is particularly important per se, but also considering the involvement of citizens also to grow up a kind of community that can also consider this aspect from a different point of view.
I think it's really important to demonstrate that we're such a success kind of driven kind of within research, within society as a whole. But yeah, with this project, like a non-sprouting bean is still a positive result. It's still providing you with information that is valuable to be fed into your app and to be passed on. And it kind of leads to my next question about, so the citizens group, you mentioned previously about the development of the app and how this was integral with the citizen science aspect of your project. I'm just wondering what sort of data was collected and how was it used kind of to supplement, gardeners and agriculturalists? How is this information from the app, used, I suppose?
So if I may, Roberto.
Yeah.
So first of all, the app is asking for morphological traits, which were based on the GeneBank descriptor. So also in the GeneBank, when an accession is multiplied, it's characterized throughout the life cycle of the plant. So you characterize leaf color, leaf shape, and then also flower color and morphology, etc., until maturity, and then the harvest, of course, as well. Then, of course, we were adding information which are relevant for us, is like the flowering time as a main driver of adaptation across Europe, as Roberto has just mentioned, the long days, etc. Then, of course, when they are mature, when they are forming pods, so like kind of phenology traits. We also have, of course, information on how the sowing is done. So what are the cultivation conditions? Do you do soaking of the seeds? Do you do direct sowing, or do you even cultivate in a small pot and then transplant? We ask for that. Then you can give us your experimental design, which can be one of the suggested ones from us, because I think we haven't mentioned yet. So every citizen gets 6 different bean varieties. One is our commercial Czech variety, where everybody gets the same. And then he gets a subset of 5 of these plant genetic resource bean varieties, which are part of the larger collection. And then he can choose an experimental design or just distribute how it's fitting to the garden or the conditions at home. And then, of course, we want to know the sowing date to especially later can interpret the flowering date and the maturity date. And also how many plants are emerging from the sown seeds. So you have to or should tell us how many seeds you used for sowing and then how much plants emerged. So kind of phenology and plant performance data. And of course, then when the harvest is done, also characteristics about yield in an easy manner for the citizens. Now, for example, you should count how many pots you have. And if it's many, many seeds, it's enough if you give up the weight of 50 seeds. And then we can calculate a certain agronomic trait from that. So those are the traits which the citizens are evaluating. And this is very, very meaningful for us because in this density across all the locations of Europe, for this many genotypes, it's impossible for a research consortium to do that on its own. So that's really coming with the help of the citizens.
One aspect that to me is also important from this point of view is the fact that we asked the citizen using the app to give us the information in terms of alphanumeric data, but also we asked them to make a picture of what they observe. Let's say we have the picture of the flower and then we have the flowering time because the picture has inside the information of the day of when it was taken. And this is for many different things. So we try to also to work on this really huge amount of information in terms of pictures to develop some artificial intelligence approach to recognize a certain phenotype. And we are try to work on it, try to make it everything much more automatic in terms of evaluation, also exploiting the power of images. That is another aspect. So we really try to combine a strong participatory work with the highest possible technological advancements that we can develop and propose, which I think is really important because sometimes we have a kind of discrepancy in some type of approaches. One is focusing only on technology and forgetting about participation. Someone is just work on participation, but then the power of these approaches may be not so strong because, I mean, they don't exploit probably the tools that are available in a proper way.
Yeah. I also want to say, so the morphological traits might not be differing too much with the environment. Depends also, there are some exceptions for that as well. But this is part of this decentralized conservation strategy. So we want to understand if the bean variety or accession still looks the way as it should if it's multiplied by different citizens. Because I think what we haven't explained yet is that we have 2 types of citizen science experiments established meanwhile. And this, what I call the main experiment, is people register new to the project. They participate the first time. They get seeds from us according to our experimental design. So if they then decide to continue in the project, they are part of the decentralized conservation community. So they do not get seeds from us again, but they should maintain the lines that they had received from us. And both is possible, they can exchange seeds from our panel, so from our large collection, with other continuing citizens. And this has worked very well. In particular, this year there were a lot of seed exchanges. And so people test also other material than they initially received. So we give our seeds only once, and then the collection should be maintained and characterized by the decentralized conservation community, which are the citizens or everybody who contributes. Yeah, so therefore we have different traits. The ones are, of course, the plant performance traits are important for us scientifically to understand the adaptation to the different regions of Europe, to identify candidate genes for important agronomic traits. And then the morphological characterization is basically important to follow up on the success of the conservation.
And I really love the idea of kind of like having, it's almost like a public library where you can, like a book exchange where you can exchange seeds with other people and grow plants that you might not have automatically kind of first assumed that you might not have been your first choice. It's just sort of like, your garden is now becoming this kind of haven for different varieties of plants, I suppose.
Yes, I think so. I think that also it's the joy of exploring, of being also surprised what you get. You may get bush beans, you may get climbing beans, you may get beans from your area, or also lines from Cuba, for example, or from South America. And of course, people are then, especially in the Facebook groups, you see that, oh, I have this line from this exotic place and it's growing quite nicely here, or this line is not growing well at all. So what I also wanted to say is that we do collect the information if a variety has not performed well, means died. That can happen now due to a disease or due to drought and heat, which were always problems already in these past rounds. This year, it's more the slug problem in the wetter countries. Also, my own beans were completely eaten by the slugs, and 5 varieties could form new leaves, 1 not. So you can report at least main types why a plant or a plot was dying in the app as well. So we can also learn from these failures and get a mark over the year how much climate change related problems like heat and drought are also affecting the bean varieties.
And it feels like the idea, like you can have a lot of these seeds locked up in these gene banks, but I don't know, to continue with kind of the money kind of analogy, it's sort of, this is liquidating kind of knowledge. It's allowing kind of, this information that's locked away, these varieties that may not see the light of day for X, Y, Z number of years. It's having these varieties living and within people's gardens and the ecosystem, I suppose.
Yeah, that is the issue. And that's the idea of the fact that there are so many different environments, microenvironments, that we will never be able to explore it with a different approach of participation, because otherwise we can have maybe multi-location, but multi-location is not the multiple environments that is a combination of the physical, the climate aspect, but also on the ecological and also social point, because human beings are part of the agroecosystem, and their role is very important. So the point of view, especially when we are talking about plants that produce food, is very important, because we eat these things, and our approach to that is very relevant in determining what is the selection pressure on these genotypes, and how we can also have success in developing new varieties, new population, new diversity.
And I just love the idea of educating, like the idea that you're going out and using like these plant growing communities as kind of an outreach avenue for education and citizen science engagement, I suppose.
Yes, that's true. So it's clearly also an educational aspect, and we intensified that over the years as well. So we made certain events, be it online or in presence, where people were educated on topics of biodiversity, where they could ask questions and got feedback. We have the exchange in the Facebook groups, which are language specific, where you can, of course, also inform on agrobiodiversity related information or topics. Yeah, this is running very well. And we are especially very happy that we always kind of understood we have some schools on board, but it was never really an assessment of how many those are, because we only get to know it when people write us emails and tell us, look, we are here from a school garden, and can you give us some more information for yeah, educating this or educating our children in school about this. And that's why since this round we have in the registration, we ask if they register on behalf of a school garden, and that's how we know that we almost have 300 school gardens across Europe on board, which is great. And we formed our own Facebook group for the teachers, and on request we support also developing material together with the schools, and we also would like to intensify that. Now, so that's a big important topic for us to also reach the young generation already, because they are our future, and they will even more suffer from the climate change and the loss of biodiversity. So they need to be informed from the beginning on those topics.
And it's so interesting to hear about this community building and horizontal kind of participation where citizens can talk to each other about their shared experiences and can learn from one another, as well as developing these educational resources and tools as well. Just because, yeah, in the future, food security is going to be it's going to be a pressing issue for a long time, and it's going to take a bottom up approach to shift people's perceptions of what a healthy diet is, moving more to plant-based diets and that sort of thing. So it really gives a better understanding of the food production process, I suppose. Yeah. So again, mentioned at the top of the interview, the Increase project won the grand prize this year for the EU Prize for Citizen Science, and I was just wanting to ask what comes next for the project, I suppose. What's your next harvest going to yield, if you don't mind the planting puns too much?
I think that the main point for us is to develop this decentralized conservation, going from citizen science to a more structured solution. Clearly, this is an objective that we have, and we need to have people supporting us on this idea and convince subjects that are relevant in making decisions on these type of things. I mean, convinced of these ideas. But clearly, we are keep going. Is that what we are going to expand the citizen science? Maybe we are trying to find additional resources from other projects, but we have a line of activity that we already plan to do and expand, and possibly to make it more common experience of this idea of the decentralized conservation, involving maybe more not only single citizens, but now more school gardens, association of urban agriculture, farmers, even citizens that they just want to use the agrobiodiversity. Because that, I think, is a point. So we are facing global challenges, and we cannot afford it to address these issues only by a few people. We need to involve the society in an active way, and also understand what are the needs of all of us, and make them work to make the things different. That, I think, is the real issue.
I also want to add, so Increase, at least the citizen science part, is also kind of a model project. So there hasn't been much done in respect to citizen science and agriculture or plants, especially. So there was one citizen science experiment here in Germany with a soybean, but this was within one country and not with plant genetic resources and without an app. So we added all the complexity on top. So we did it across Europe in the different language with the help of an app. And with plant genetic resources that also have certain legal aspects included. That's the dangerous standard material transfer agreement that citizens have to accept in the app. So that's a contract based on the treaty about plant genetic resources. And that was the first big hurdle or handicap for the citizens. And I think that we are really successful in educating people on the legal aspects about the plant genetic resources by this project. But basically it came from a lot of complexity, and we're very happy that we managed to have this run successfully. And of course it can be now a model for extending such kind of approach to other species and crops.
Mm-hmm. I want to just take an opportunity to ask, is there anything else you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to share of any up and coming events, or anything that hasn't really been, we haven't addressed in the last half an hour or so?
Maybe Roberto first.
I think that one thing that we miss is the issue that is also related to the All Increase project that is focusing on food legumes.
Mm-hmm.
As another aspect of a pillar of our project is the idea that food legumes that are also important for the cultural and food tradition in Europe and in the Mediterranean basin are really key plants to work on because of the climate change issue and the needs. As you mentioned before, we need to promote the shift from meat-based to plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. And this is a key aspect if we want to address the climate change and biodiversity crisis. And also the aspect of also not only in terms of land use, but also for instance, about the pollution of our fresh water of nitrogen that is mostly coming from fertilizers that are present in the agricultural system. So this is a very important point on which we have to focus. And one way we decided to do this is because we thought that there was not enough research on this species, and we need to put these species in the same, let's say, capacity that other species have already, because there was a strong investment from private and public sectors. So that is a very important point. Educating to change the diet, to shift diet to plant-based and to use legumes much more for food and agriculture.
And if you're asking for further events, so what is next in the line? So of course we are having the exhibition at the Ars Electronica in Linz in September. We are planning for the citizen science events locally, for example, also here at IPK, when we want to make, like last year, another citizen science day where we had 100 participants here that get background information in forms of presentations, but also information on the gene bank. They could visit gene bank. They had legume food here, and we had an open Q&A session, which was really successful, and they were very happy to understand more about how the genetic diversity is conserved and what are the aspects relevant for this. Then, of course, we would start our registration, so people can register again during November until February. That's typically the time where we collect citizens for the next round, and we would be very happy, of course, to receive again many more new participants to the project, and hope to also keep a lot of the old ones going. And that's the main points for this year. We will be, of course, present on conferences, for example, the Eucarpia conference now in Leipzig in August, where I will also give a talk about the increased citizen science approach. And let's see what else comes along. And I think one more thing that I definitely want to say in this interview is that we are so thankful to our community and to all the project partners, because it's really everybody of the project is involved in the citizen science experiment dissemination and in the translations, etc., all the background material. That's not a single man's or women's job. It's a big team. We have a core team, so I want to express my thanks to the members of the core team who meet online every week in their lunch break on Friday since many, many years now. And it's like a family meanwhile. And of course, to the stakeholders, as said already, that they were disseminating the citizen science approach. But mostly, of course, every single participant who ever participated in the project, in the citizen science experiment, and especially to the ones who are ongoing and are really keeping the community alive. So that's really great to see. And I think it really brings together the people all across Europe. We all share the same interests, no matter what the language or culture is. And that's great to see.
No, I want to, yeah, I fully agree with what Kerstin was saying. I just want to add an acknowledgement of some people that have not an easy condition, like prisoners, and in some cases are participating in the prison to the citizen science experiment, and they find this experience useful. And I think that that's an important point. We have someone in Poland and in Italy, I think. And I think that we will have a lot of activities also, including the activity of the project and the activity of the stakeholder consortium. And I would suggest everybody to keep a date if they want to be in the website of the project, that is pulsesincrease.eu, and also using the Facebook group, because in that case they can also speak in their own, writing in their own language, and there is no barrier if anybody wants to be part of the Facebook group, even if they are not a citizen scientist. They can always be there and see what is going on.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say thank you very much for this really interesting interview and for joining me today to explain the INCREASE project a little bit more. And I'm very excited to see you both to see the INCREASE team in Linz in about a month's time. That'll be a very exciting opportunity.
Also for us, we are waiting for that.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you for joining us again. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.